Over a year ago, I released a video on the subject of why is Alliance Raid Roulette always Crystal Tower. A while after this video, a change was made to how Alliance Raid Roulette works, and with Dawntrail, further changes were made. So in this video, for those that need it, I will go over how Alliance Raid Roulette used to work, how it worked in the tail end of Endwalker, and then how it works now, while also going over the potential effects of each system, and then also talk about how well the current state appears to be working, at least from what I can see. But before we get too deep into that, I would like you to consider for yourself. Recently, has it always been Crystal Tower for you? Maybe Shadow of Ma has joined the fray, or is it actually a reasonable mix for you? I would also like you to consider whether this may be because of how you queue. Have you unlocked a large selection of Alliance raids? Do you queue as high enough level jobs to have a large selection? And also, do you often queue with friends that might not have a large selection for level or unlocking reasons? All of these things play into all this, and I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments as well. Now, originally, the way Alliance Raid Roulette worked was that you simply needed to unlock at least 2 Alliance raids and satisfy the item level and level requirements of them. As the main scenario quest requires unlocking and completing the full Crystal Tower series, this meant you could satisfy this requirement with Labyrinth of the Ancients and Circus Tower and an item level of 70. And if you only had an item level of 70, or at least below 90, you would only be able to land in Labyrinth of the Ancients or Circus Tower. Nowhere else, regardless of whether you had unlocked it or not. As the Crystal Tower series happens to be the fastest to run by far among all of the Alliance raids, many players would actively use a trick called item level cheesing by simply unequipping gear until they dropped below the item level for any other Alliance raids. Then queue, and then once inside, put on their gear again. Although, they could probably re-equip it once they had queued in the first place. You get what I mean. This, combined with Crystal Tower being the only mandatory Alliance raid series, and being the lowest level Alliance raid series, combined to make Crystal Tower almost inescapable from the Alliance Raid Roulette. It reached a point where more and more players would outright leave as soon as they saw it was Crystal Tower, and this is still happening sometimes today. Notably, a common problem with roulettes with vastly different difficulties and clear times is that if the reward doesn't justify it, then players will feel compelled to leave if they get something harder than they expected. Originally, the rewards for the various old Alliance raids, meaning anything except the newest ones, were mostly same if you were already max level. So unless you needed something specific from a specific Alliance raid, like a 2B outfit or shorts with tights or what have you, Crystal Tower was ultimately the more time efficient option. If for a moment we ignore the whole part about having fun playing video games. So in 6.5, adjustments were made to Alliance raids and the roulette itself. First, all of the Alliance raids, except the Crystal Tower series, got additions to their tombstone rewards, making them at least slightly more lucrative. However, it is difficult to make an Alliance raid reward lucrative enough when you're comparing 12 to 15 minutes in Crystal Tower to closer to 40 minutes in Tower at Paradigm's Breach in the Nier series. The change that was made to the Alliance Raid Roulette itself was that depending on what level you were, you had to satisfy the item level requirements for at least 2 of the highest level Alliance raids you could feasibly access somehow at your current level. This meant, for example, that if you were level 65, you needed an item level of 175, since that is the requirement for Weeping City of Ma. This requirement would be applied regardless of whether you had unlocked this Alliance raid or even could unlock it in the first place, which notably caused some grievances for players slowly working their way through the MSQ while enjoying dailies and other parts of the game. You could easily be level 60 before completing Heavensward. The quote-unquote upside to this change was that it completely removed the ability for players to item level cheese, as the game forced you to have the item level for the duties you could possibly enter, whether you had them or not. However, a colossal downside to this system is that while the roulette forced you to have the item level for the duties, it did not force you to unlock them, which meant that some newer players, or simply old characters of veterans, would feel compelled to not unlock Alliance raids to optimize their Alliance Raid Roulette. As long as only Crystal Tower was in the list, you could not land anywhere but Crystal Tower. Is that a problem? Probably not. No need to optimize the game around preventing the presumably small selection of players that optimize to this extent from doing so. It probably doesn't matter for the rest of the players, aside from the fact that this does still contribute to how common Crystal Tower is. Another effect of this change was that, at times, there would be optimizers that would actively seek out level 50 to 59 players to queue Alliance Raid Roulette with them, to make sure the duty would be Crystal Tower. To add to this, both in the original system and this one, some of the players forcing Alliance Raid Roulette to be Crystal Tower viewed it as doing everyone else a favor by saving them from the more tedious content. Again, let's ignore the whole part about having fun playing video games. And now, with the release of Dawntrail, Alliance Raid Roulette was adjusted slightly again. Now, you only need to satisfy the item level requirement for any Alliance raids you can enter. This means, for example, if you're level 83 and have unlocked Crystal Tower and the Ivalice Alliance Raid series fully, then you're expected to have an item level of at least 365, as that is the requirement for Obon Monastery. The roulette ignores the requirements for the Near Raid series as you have not unlocked them. The upside to this system is that a player working their way through the game and unlocking things naturally will not be punished for overleveling content, as they will only be expected to have the item level for duties they actually have. The downside to this system is that, again, this can motivate excessively optimizing players to actively avoid unlocking Alliance raids to make sure their selection is optimized for Crystal Tower or whatever. There can even be cases of players that simply hate specific Alliance raids and now are frustrated that because they unlocked it, they now cannot avoid it anymore, like some weird sort of mousetrap. Personally, there is no Alliance raid that I dislike so much that I would be annoyed to get it. Although I do find Labyrinth of the Ancients and Circus Tower dreadfully boring due to the low difficulty. However, with that said, my personal experience since Dawntrail is that queuing for Alliance Raid Roulette alone as a max level job with every Alliance raid unlocked, I get a nice variety, regardless of what time of day I queue for it. The more players that are in my party, however, the more likely it feels that the duty will be either Crystal Tower or Shadow of Ma. Weirdly, randomly, yes. I wonder if this also applies to you. But let's talk about how that could be. Although, for many, this might be entirely obvious. Nearly all players that can queue for Alliance Raid Roulette will have Labyrinth of the Ancients and Circus Tower unlocked. Only slightly fewer than that will also have World of Darkness unlocked, simply because all three are mandated by the MSQ that they must be done. This means the players that have not unlocked World of Darkness are simply players that have yet to unlock it, and will probably do so in short order, or at least eventually. The only other exception to this is that a returning player that quit before patch 5.3 would have not played the game in the time frame where Crystal Tower was required to complete the MSQ. And so, they could realistically have Shadow of Ma, Ivalice, and even the first part of the Near Raid series without having unlocked Crystal Tower yet, as they would still eventually have to do it to progress past the middle of Shadowbringer's story. In other words, with only slight inaccuracy, we can assume basically 100% of players queuing for Alliance Raid Roulette have Crystal Tower unlocked. At least 2 parts, if not 3. Then, a percentage of players will have the Shadow of Mars series unlocked, but only a subset of them will be queuing on a job past level 59. Similarly, a percentage of players will have the Evilly series unlocked, but only a subset will be queuing on a job past level 69. Nice. Again, a percentage of players will have the Yorha Dark Apocalypse or Near Raids unlocked, but only a subset will be queuing on a job past level 79. And finally, only a percentage of players will have Myths of the Realm unlocked, but only a subset of those will be queuing on a job past level 89. Now, the fact that there is a percentage of players that straight up don't have each Alliance Raid unlocked is partly to blame for the fact that Alliance Raids are not very clearly presented front and center. In fact, I've heard multiple times from Sprouts that they legitimately thought for a long time that Alliance Raids was a discontinued feature just like MSQ Roulette content. Coming from A Realm Reborn, you unlock both of these roulettes in a way that is mandated by the MSQ itself, and you have 3 of each. It is perfectly reasonable to assume that this was also a discontinued feature when you don't get herded towards the next Alliance Raid at some point at level 60 or even 70. This means that at least highlighting the existence of Alliance Raids a bit more clearly could already help immensely here. Another thing that is partly to blame is that, as old content, many of these Alliance Raids may not offer anything a player would want today. I believe most of the potential glamour you could want from Shadow of Mar has been reused as crafted sets and whatnot. This means the only motivation is that it blocks off a quest line in Endwalker involving Tataru, which, again, you might not care about, or even know about at this point. While Evilise blocks off all of Boja, an Extreme, a special Savage encounter, and Shadowbringer's relics, if you don't actually care about any of this, then no reason to unlock it. The Near Raids pretty much only block off Glamour, and if you don't care much for Near or the Glam, then there is no reason to unlock that one either. The exact same thing applies to the Myths of the Realm, with the exception of the hilarious discovery that Aglaia, and to some extent both Euphrosyne and Thalea, are so EXP efficient compared to time of completion, even with a random group, that they can compete with doing actual leveling duties until you hit level 97. Which means some players might feel motivated to unlock these, or at least just Aglaia, just for that. Now, acknowledging all of these reasons to not unlock the various Alliance Raids, it probably makes very good sense that the more players you have in your group before you queue, the more likely it is that you simply land in Crystal Tower, as each player in the group represents the possibility for an Alliance Raid series to be completely cut from the list of options. Except Crystal Tower, since everyone has Crystal Tower. Which brings me to my last point. Is the current state of Alliance Raid Roulette good enough? Is there more that could be done to make it better and more varied? In my experience, when queuing alone, specifically alone, it seems like Alliance Raid Roulette has plenty of variety. However, adding more party members seems to have the effect of greatly reducing this variety. This particular weakness is unavoidable. Obviously, the variety is diminished if there are players that are lower levels that cut off multiple options. Obviously, the variety is diminished if anyone in the group is missing any Alliance Raids whatsoever. Which means, from my perspective, I think Alliance Raid Roulette itself is fine. It accomplishes what it needs to do well enough, and the weaknesses of the roulette are caused by other things. What could be done, however, is 1. Make Alliance Raid quest lines more visible so new players have a lower chance of missing them. Whether this requires an NPC pointing at the quest NPC starter more aggressively, or something else entirely, I don't know. Notably, I recall that the Endwalker MSQ outright includes the starting of the Alliance Raid series in the story and lets you know to go and start it. but not any more than that. Is that enough? Does it need more? I don't know. Option 2. Lock more things behind Alliance raids. Or in other words, add more lucrative things to what you get for unlocking and clearing the various Alliance raids, so players feel more motivated to go and do that after they cycle out of relevancy. Shadow of Ma, Yorha Dark Apocalypse, and Myths of the Realm especially need this, I would say. While on the subject, I think normal raids could also benefit a bit from this. Notably, in both of these suggestions, the intention is to tackle the different kinds of reasons players skip the Alliance raids. Either not knowing where they are or that they exist, or motivating players that would otherwise have zero interest to at least have some interest. There is also one last thing that could even out Alliance Raid Roulette way more. Crystal Tower uniquely has the advantage of being mandatory. This means that all the other Alliance raids are on a more even playing field between each other, as players can pick and choose which ones they unlock, but they must have Crystal Tower. To make Alliance Raid Roulette more varied, I would suggest making a Crystal Tower Roulette and removing Crystal Tower from the general Alliance Raid Roulette. For all I care, they could replicate the exact reward from Alliance Raid Roulette onto Crystal Tower Roulette and simply keep them separated. This means that the players that don't want Crystal Tower can just not do it. Those players that specifically want Crystal Tower and none of the others can do just that one. And the players that don't mind either are effectively rewarded with +1 more daily roulette they can do if they like. Another suggestion I've heard tossed around is putting Crystal Tower in MSQ Roulette. However, having 3 4-man duties mixed with 3 24-man duties is likely to mean that the roulette just never is going to be Crystal Tower. I think having these duties in 2 separate roulettes is the safer option. The potential risk of this solution is of course that we just passed a bug and now Shadow of Ma has the advantage over the rest, that it requires the lowest level, so it might become the most popular chosen for a similar reason to Alexander in normal raids. Lowest level and unlocked first. But what do you think? Is Alliance Raid Roulette working perfectly for you? Do you have any ideas on what could be better? I would love to hear about it in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact: the XP reward for the various Alliance raids scale with the level and so the difficulty of them, and this was also true before the Endwalker changes. However, given that XP is often simply listed ambiguously as "you get XP", this was not very obvious to most players, me included. Alliance Raid Roulette XP bonuses also seem to scale with giving a better reward for the higher level duties, just to further underline that point.